What if there was a game that was so incredibly good that it opened your eyes to an entirely new genre of games and made you just want to immerse yourself in that world and play them as much as you possibly could? Well, that is exactly the kind of game that we're going to be talking about today.
Because it is my guilt, I claim you, grievous miracle. Make my chest hurt with regret. Forge your punishment and nail it deep. Shape my guilt once again.
Blasphemous is one of those games that I have owned for quite some time, but unfortunately I have not gotten around to playing it. And recently, thanks to Humble Bundle, I got a copy of Blasphemous 2, and I decided, hey, what better time to go through and play the first one and make a review on it. And my god, I was not disappointed. So what is Blasphemous in the first place? Well, it is a dark and absolutely brutal Metroidvania game with very, very deep lore surrounding it, to the point where I can't even necessarily fully explain the lore myself. It is part of a genre that is being defined by some people as Bible punk, essentially, where it's, you know, a very religious inspired kind of story, which is very, very cool. And if you're a fan of any sort of Dark Souls or Castlevania inspired games, exploration, RPG mechanics, and all those sorts of things, I think that you will absolutely love this game, and I hope to really showcase it to you in a productive way and help you decide if it's something that you want to buy. Perhaps you're just on the fence after you also got a second copy, the copy of the second game, I should say, through Humble Bundle, or maybe you just came across it on a Steam sale and you're looking to see what it's all about. So we're going to be talking about the combat, the atmosphere, the overall design of the game, and some drawbacks that are certainly present with it. So let's go ahead and hop straight into it. One of the first things that I like to talk about inside any game review that I do is going to be the combat. And the reason for that is in most games that you play, roughly 95% of the experience is going to be related to combat, right? So that is the majority of your game. In most games, unless it's a point and click adventure, you're not just sitting there reading boxes or, you know, picking dialogue options. You're fighting things, you're exploring, and those sorts of things. So combat is super crucial. Blasphemous absolutely delivers on the combat front. The combat feels incredibly responsive, absolutely feels fluid. You can chain together, obviously, multiple attack, and there's combos inside the game that you can actually learn and unlock for your main character. There's also, obviously, parry mechanics, there's dodges, and there's ranged attacks. And you can time these together so incredibly well, and the parry windows feel absolutely perfect. They don't feel too easy, they don't feel too hard. You don't have to look at the enemy and see when they move one pixel on their pinky toe, and that's when you have to time your parry, like some other games that we see coming out. It's just, it wraps itself together so incredibly well, and the combat is every bit as fun, in my opinion, as the actual exploration. And not only that, but the combat is further just enhanced by the amount of enemy variation. I believe that there's over 60 different enemy types in the base game, so not including the DLC. There's actually an achievement for killing every different enemy type. All of these enemies have generally unique execution animations that you can sometimes trigger if you get a certain amount of damage on them, but not actually kill them, essentially. And whenever you explore and you reach a new area, there's always consistently at least 1 to 2 new enemy types with new movesets, new ways to counter them, and obviously a new visual look as well that just keep things super interesting, enjoyable, and engaging, even on a second or a third playthrough of the game. So that is just so incredibly well done. What's one of the things that you do the most in a story-based game after combat? Well, that, in my opinion, should be partaking in the story, and a lot of that comes down to voice acting or the sound design of the game. So I've kind of split things up. We're going to be talking about the voice acting and the music in separate sections, and the voice acting in this game is damn near perfection. It is so incredibly good. It is the chef's kiss, right? So the performances of the voice actors are absolutely fantastic. It always feels a little bit dramatic in a good way, like a very positive way, as well as immersive, and there's certainly some periods in there where you're definitely left with like a haunting impression or a lasting impression of whatever the voice actors have said, because it fits the vibe of the game so incredibly well, and the voice actors, you could tell, definitely did a fantastic job, right? Like, they understood what they were going for, and the sound design complements that perfectly, because they consistently add even small details like echoes or, just certain voice effects, essentially, to really just draw you into a certain character and to ensure that no two characters are going to sound the same, and that, there's just a lot of differentiation between them. And there's a standout character, in my opinion, in the way of this kind of very tall sentinel type dude that kind of helps you around the game. I'll see if I can throw a clip of that in here. I don't know what his name is. I'm giving you a review on the game, not necessarily the story. If you play through it and you're curious more about him, you can certainly feel free to, look into it. But his voice acting is always absolutely fantastic, and especially at the end of the game where he's just talking to you about how you're going to basically meet your destiny and you don't know what's going to happen, but you can only hope. It really sticks with you, and it conveys a lot of emotion, because if you're not familiar, you'll find this out very quickly anyways, but the main character in Blasphemous is silent. So he's the penitent one in silence, essentially. He can't speak. So a lot of times with games that have main characters that can't speak, there's not a whole lot of emotion to be found, in my opinion. But this game absolutely makes up for it by every single other character in the game, whether it be kind of just a one-off, knockoff enemy that you might face, or whether it be, a side character in a secret room that you found somewhere, which there are plenty of, by the way, so make sure to explore every nook and cranny as well as you possibly can.
You have been allowed to meet the visage of contrition, penitent one in silence. After bowing before the holy custodian visages, the door at the end of the Bridge of Calvary has been opened. Traverse now its threshold under the strict eye of His Holiness. We penitents carry such guilt that perhaps the affliction is giving us a second breath. But be wary. Amongst prayers, it might silently come creeping to us one day.
And so in any good game, we've established that you're going to be fighting things, messing up the bad guys. You're also going to be listening to some voice acting. And finally, to tie all of that together, you're going to have music in the mix, right? So there's going to be either background music or a soundtrack to the game, those sorts of things. And Blasphemous does it absolutely perfect as well. For a lot of the game, there isn't really an overarching soundtrack. There's going to be generally kind of soundtracks that are specific to certain areas, certain regions of the game. But once the bosses come out, it's an entirely different story. From what I could tell, it seems like every single boss has a different, unique soundtrack to that particular boss, and the soundtracks go hard. They are a joy to listen to the point where you're almost tempted to go out of the game and just listen to it on repeat on YouTube or something on the second monitor, just so that you can get hyped up to go and try and fight this boss again. The music is done absolutely incredibly well, and that includes the lack of it during regular gameplay. A lot of games make the mistake of just having too much noise going on and too much music or too much background sounds, right? But Blasphemous hits a absolute pinnacle when it comes to balancing that, essentially. And I never felt like the music was ruining my immersion. I never felt like there should be music here, but there wasn't. And just having music that's not intrusive on your immersion is so underrated, in my opinion. There's not, repetitive combat music that's going to play. It's done so incredibly well, and it definitely helps to elevate the mood of the game as well, because, you can have a dark, gritty setting all you want with brutality and death and carnage and all that, but if you have some sort of happy-go-lucky soundtrack in the background every 5 minutes that repeats on loop, it kind of ruins that setting. So it was very nice to see the sound on both a voice acting level as well as the music level done so incredibly well. And lastly, that's going to bring me to some of the negatives and the closing thoughts about the game. Now, really, there's one negative about the game, and I'm not going to elaborate on it. I'm going to leave you to figure that out yourself when you're playing the game, but I will summarize it in one singular word for you, and that is ladders. Enough said. Let me know down in the comments once you figure out what I mean by that and what your experience was. There is a lot of platforming in this game, and there's hidden challenges and everything like that that really give you a way to test your skills as well, so it makes sure that things just don't get boring overall, and sometimes ladders can be a bit of an obstruction in that, but that's all I'll say. Those are the only negatives, or the only negative rather is literally just ladders. Everything else is fantastic. The game quite literally left me wanting more, and for a person who has a Steam library of over 800 games, so I oftentimes just play something for an hour and say screw this and then move on to something else, that says a lot in my opinion. So it is such a incredibly good game. The story combines so well with everything else that we've discussed that I would highly recommend that you give this a try. I would say even at a full price purchase, it is definitely worth it. You don't have to wait for a sale or anything like that. Definitely pick it up, play through it, enjoy it. Get the second game if you like it. I haven't played the second game yet, but there will be a review coming on that at some point in the future. So, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video, do all that sort of YouTube algorithm mumbo jumbo, the comments and the shares and all that sort of good stuff. And all of that being said, I am now going to show you something that will definitely have some spoilers attached to it, so if you don't want that, go ahead and click off the video now. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
You have freed His Holiness from his afflicted torment, and now he walks by the old processions on the other side of the dream. The cradle of the grievous miracle, the final relic. The grail of blood and gold that emanated from the forehead of the Father as he silently lamented the moment of his blessed twisting. That first relic is here, at the top of the Ashen Mountain, next to the turned throne where His Holiness was kissed by a miraculous pain. And now, your final communion with the miracle awaits. Only you will be able to know how much of it has seeped into your guilty heart. The mountain of ashes that swallowed up sins and sinners alike has had no mercy on you either. At the mercy of the miracle you were, and at the mercy of the miracle you remain. You are no longer anything but one more anonymous visage, without a voice, without countenance. Your penitence is over.